Welcome to the mind mapping workshop for story ideas. Today we will be taking your ideas for your book from inception to expansion. What you can expect from this workshop are three major things. So first, we're going to learn how to listen for story ideas, and there will be a breakout exercise that you can do. The second thing we're going to do is clarify those story ideas, specifically surrounding the genre and target audience, the overarching theme, and then your characters, how to develop them, and also what their secrets are. And then lastly, we are going to expand upon those story ideas. And this is where we are going to have a mind mapping exercise. You can find the template on the membership site. I highly recommend, if you haven't already downloaded it, to go ahead and press pause on this workshop and download that. So once we get to that section, you are all ready to go. Before we dive into all of this, I do want to say one thing first, and that is to write for yourself, not the market. There may be a lot of industry experts, quote unquote, out there who would tell you to write what's popular, write what's trending, write what's selling well in the market. But this is the thing about trends and what's popular is that they change. Over time, trends change. People change. Readers change. The types of things that they want to read. It all changes. And so really, when it comes to writing your book, you want to make sure that you're writing for yourself and not the market, not writing what's popular right now, because there's a good chance a year from now, it's not going to be trending anymore. It's not going to be popular. It may seem very outdated or overdone. And then you're sitting there with your manuscript, maybe unable to get it out there on submission, or maybe it's taking too long to self-publish it. Not to mention, it's already quite a lengthy process to write the book, so make sure you're writing for yourself. The world needs your story, your voice, your unique perspective. And just to put this into perspective, there will only ever be one you. In your unique lifestyle, with your unique circumstances, there's only ever going to be one of you with the life experiences that you've had up until this point. And so the world needs that. The world needs you to write your story the way that you're going to tell it, because there's no one else out there who is going to tell your story the way you can. And that's because no one is you. So let's talk about how to listen for story ideas. This is a question I get a lot, which is, how do you come up with book ideas? For some people, listening for story ideas or allowing that flow of creativity, that spark of inspiration, is somewhat easy. For other people, it's a bit more difficult. I fall on the easier scale, where I feel like I have way too many book ideas. Like, there are so many books that I want to write, and sometimes I feel like I can't get to them all. But how to listen for story ideas, these are the four main things that I utilize in order to get that spark of inspiration for my next book. You can get story ideas from dreams, from past experiences, from eyewitness accounts, and even from accidental or intentional eavesdropping. I know that dreams I've had in the past have served as wonderful jumping off points for plot ideas for some of my stories. When it comes down to it, we all have stories to tell. You may not know exactly how that story is going to look or exactly what's going to happen, but we all have stories to tell. If you think about your life and what you've lived through, what you've gone through, that is a story. That's a story to tell. That may not be the book that you want to write, but I never want you to think that you don't have a story to tell, because you do. Sometimes it just takes digging a little bit deeper to figure out what that story is and how you want to express it to the world. So just to give you an example of how I came up with my story ideas, I currently have two series that I have written and published. The first is the Alpha Drive trilogy, and the second is the Shadow Crown series. Now, the trilogy is completely written and published. The Shadow Crown series has the first 2 books out, but it is going to be a series of 6 books, so I'm still in the process of writing those books. Now, with the Alpha Drive trilogy, it's actually a really funny story, because when I first started writing this book, I thought it was going to be a new adult contemporary novel, and it was loosely based on my experiences in college. And so this was the first draft, the first book that I had ever written. And it took me a couple of years because I would write a little bit in college, like my senior year, and then I put it away because I graduated and got a job in corporate. And so I was busy kind of, setting myself up for my career and my future. And then eventually I realized that my career was never going to fill that gaping hole in my heart that writing always had. And so I dusted off that manuscript probably about 2 or 3 years later just to look at it. And I read through it, and it was terrible. It was absolutely atrocious. It was the worst thing that I have ever read. And really what had happened was the characters were flat. And I realized that contemporary, while I liked to read contemporary at that time, it was not my strong suit when it came to writing in that genre. At that point, I'd felt pretty downtrodden because it was just so terrible. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible writer. And why did I even attempt this? So I didn't really work on it anymore because I just thought it was so bad. And then it was maybe like 7 months later, I just moved into a new apartment complex. And it was one weekend I was watching the Matrix movies because I love the Matrix movies. I've always loved sci-fi and alternate realities and just that whole vibe. And I remember after I was watching the Matrix movies, I went to go take a shower. And it's always when I'm doing the most mundane things like washing the dishes or, putting shampoo in my hair or straightening my hair or blow drying my hair. Always something to doing like a chore or a task that's just, I don't have to think about it. That's when my mind wanders. And that's usually when inspiration for a plot point or a subplot or a plot twist happens to hit me. And that's exactly what happened, except it was for the entire genre and theme of the book. I realized, oh my gosh, I love sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm not that great at writing contemporary. So why not turn this novel into young adult science fiction dystopian? Because that's something that I was like, I really want to write this. I think I can turn this into that. And I kept a lot of the characters the same. I just added more dimension to them. And because I changed the genre, it was so much easier for me to give them a little bit more oomph, if you will. So once I wrote that manuscript, I rewrote it a few times, but eventually got it to the point where I was really, really happy with it. And I was really excited to share it with the world. And so that's exactly what I did. And that ended up becoming a trilogy, which you can see here. The Alpha Drive, The Order of Omega is the second book. And then the final book in the trilogy is Restitution. And then the Shadow Crown series is young adult dark fantasy. It was always going to be young adult dark fantasy, so I don't have a story like I did with the Alpha Drive trilogy in terms of changing the genre. But strangely enough, the idea for the Shadow Crown series, which is dark fantasy, like there's magic and assassins and kingdoms, and for some reason, I came up with this idea at the Houston rodeo. Like I was just at the rodeo, the rodeo has nothing to do with fantasy except for maybe the horses, because a lot of my characters do ride horses. But other than that, there's absolutely no reason why a dark fantasy plot for a book should come to me while I was at the rodeo. So this is really just to say that your ideas can come at any time, at any place. And it's just opening yourself up to that communication, to that inspiration, to the spark, and to the flow of those ideas. And sometimes when you're not so busy with your day-to-day, just doing all the stuff, that's usually when the ideas will just hit you over the head. It's normally when you're doing the most mundane things, the things that don't take any real thought to do. So this is what I do to prepare to listen for those story ideas. And this is something I do pretty much on a regular basis. It's become a part of my brainstorming process. I always have a notebook and pen at the ready. You can also use your phone if you like to, you like the more technological side of things where you just have the notes app open on your phone. But I like to have a notebook and pen because I like to physically write things down, but whatever works for you. So you have your notebook and pen at the ready. Take some deep breaths for 1 minute. And what that deep breathing, and I mean full lung breathing, like in through your nose, count to 4, hold at the top for 5 to 7 counts, and then exhale through your mouth and keep doing that. Keep that deep breathing going, because what that's going to do is clear your mind of any drama, negativity, doubts. It's going to get rid of all of that, and it's going to open up space for ideas. So once you've been breathing deeply for a minute or 2 minutes or maybe even 3, and you feel like the drama, the negativity, the doubts, the judgment, whatever is going on in your mind, you feel that that's kind of floated away, close your eyes and just let your mind wander. Just be the gentle observer of where your mind goes. And you may find that at first it goes to chores or the next thing on your to-do list or how you need to go answer that email. But really, if you can just close your eyes and let your mind wander, not judge yourself for what you're thinking about, and just let it kind of ping pong around a little bit, you may be surprised at where it ends up taking you, possibly even down like a visualization journey that may give you some kind of inspiration or a little nugget for your book. So let's do a quick breakout exercise. If you have a notebook and pen or a piece of paper, I want you to answer the following questions. What book or story can you not find on the shelf? What does the world need to know? What message do you wish to share with the world? If you could write about anything at all, what would it be? So you can go ahead and pause this recording and go ahead and do this breakout exercise. And then once you are finished with it, come back and we will continue the workshop. Now that you've done that breakout exercise, I wanted to offer some other brainstorming exercises that you can do in case, those first 4 questions didn't really work out. These are some other great exercises I like to dive into when I feel like my creative well is dry. So the first question I ask myself is, what was the last vivid dream that I had? And then I write it down in as much detail as I can remember. You can also think of a scene in a movie or an ending in a book that really irked you or frustrated you. And then you can write down how you would change that scene or what you would have done differently if you were the writer, producer, or director. You can also take the first line of a random book and write it down, then write your own version of what comes next. And that's something where you just don't really want to think too heavily on it. Just let your imagination run wild. Oftentimes, the first line of a book is really captivating, really gripping. And so it's great to use that to then write your own version of what comes next. And even better if it's a book on your shelf that you haven't read yet, because then you're not influenced by maybe what you've read in the past. Now we're going to talk about how to clarify those story ideas, because that first section that we just talked about was about brainstorming the ideas. It was about the inception of the book idea. Now we're going to talk about how to clarify those ideas. I love this quote by Mason Cooley. It says, "Reading gives us some place to go when we have to stay where we are." Hands down, reading is the best research as a writer, because reading feeds both sides of the brain. Your right brain loves reading because it can escape to unknown worlds, it can fall in love with characters, and it experiences what many people would call magic, because you are literally visualizing what is happening in your head as you read the words on the page. That is actual magic, if you ask me. And then your left brain loves reading because it's a form of exercise, analysis, and research. So if you want to become a better writer, reading is the best research that you can do. In order to clarify your book idea, you want to strive for solution-based research, which means that if you want to, you can start taking notes as you read. And I know that kind of takes away from the whole point of reading, for leisure. But if you're wanting to research to become a better writer, to really learn how to clarify your story ideas, the best thing that you can do is look at how other authors have crafted their stories, their plot lines, their characters, and their worlds. And that's the best way to learn, because obviously they've done the research, they've written the stories, and especially if these authors that you're reading have multiple books, obviously they're doing something right. If they have a large readership, they're doing something right. So as you read, you can ask questions like, was the pacing of the story too fast, too slow? Were the descriptions too flowery? What was it about character X that drove you insane? Were there areas where you wanted more detail, or was there too much detail? Then, once you've taken those notes, you'll want to provide solutions to those questions. That's what I mean when I say strive for solution-based research. So it's not enough just to take notes, but you want to ask yourself as the author, what would you have done differently? And then take additional notes on that, maybe even rewrite certain sections or redevelop one of the characters just to give yourself a better idea as to how you would have written the story. That's going to help you discover and really refine your voice and your writing style. You'll want to determine the genre of your story idea up front. Like, this should be one of the first things that you do. And there are two overarching umbrellas, if you will. You have genres and then you have subgenres. So we have literary fiction, which is writing that is valued for its complex form, language, or style. And really, those are like the classics, like The Great Gatsby, The Catcher in the Rye, etc. And then we also have commercial, or what is more commonly known as mainstream fiction. And these are plot-driven works with the intent of fitting into a specific literary genre. So some examples here are Harry Potter, Divergent, Twilight, and so on. Now, there are 5 main genres within commercial fiction. And obviously there are a lot more genres, a lot more subgenres, if you will, but these are the 5 main ones that I would focus on at first. So you have romance. That's basically where characters fall in love and begin a romantic relationship. You have horror, a story that elicits fear, dread, and or dismay. Thriller and suspense uses suspense, excitement, apprehension, and exhilaration to tell a story. Science fiction and fantasy contains elements out of the ordinary, like new technology, magic, other worlds, etc. And mystery and crime, a story with a puzzle that needs to be solved. Disentangle it and it will lead you to the answer. Once you know the genre you're writing in, you should then determine your target audience, which is who you're writing for. So are you writing for children under 8 years old? Middle grade, that's usually for audiences and readers 8 to 12 years old. Young adult, readers 12 to 18 years old. New adult, readers 18 to 25 years old, and adult over 25 years old. A really quick way to determine who your target audience is and who you're writing for is to think about how old your character, your main character, is in your book. So if your protagonist is between the ages of 12 and 18 years old, more likely than not, you are writing a young adult book, because young adults, 12 to 18 years old, tend to want to read about characters that are in their same age range. I know there are plenty of adults and new adults that read young adult books. I am one of those readers, but it's just a good rule of thumb to follow when it comes to your target audience matching up with the age of your protagonist. Now that you know your genre and your target audience, you can start looking at what the theme of your book is going to be. Now, do not confuse the theme of your book with the genre. They are not the same thing, and I'll go over some themes, some examples of themes in just a minute. But the theme of your book is the overarching message you want to convey to the reader. So you may be writing a science fiction novel, but science fiction and technology is not the theme of your novel, because science fiction and technology is not the overarching message that you want to convey to the reader. So to clarify the theme, ask yourself, what are the characters' motivations for doing the things that they do? Are they seeking justice, revenge, security? Or are they merely just surviving? This is certainly not an exhaustive list of themes, but here are some of the most common themes that you'll find in mainstream fiction. Alienation, the effects of the loneliness of, how to cure it. Ambition, getting what you want, stunted by or thwarted. Betrayal, the pain of, in love and friendship. Coming of age, loss of innocence. Courage, as in the courage to deal with conflict, lack of, developing, conquering with. Deception, how to deceive, results of deceiving. Discovery, what does it take to discover new places, the inner meaning, strength, possibly even treasure. Escape from life, routine, prison, family pressures, and so on. Death, how to escape. Facing death, what happens after death, the consequences of death. Fear, driven by, dealing with, conquering fear. Freedom, the loss of it, gaining it, handling it, fighting for it. Good versus evil, this is a really common one. Survival of one despite the other. Triumph of one over the other. Isolation, both physical and emotional. Jealousy, trouble caused by, denial of, driven by. Justice, the fight for it. Injustice, truth versus justice. Loss of life, innocence, love, friends, how to avoid loss. Loneliness, no man is an island or hell is other people. Love fades, it's blind, can overcome all obstacles. Lust, for power, for sex, for money, for something else. Power, the search for, the loss of, what we are willing to exchange for power. Prejudice, racism, bigotry, snobbery, dealing with prejudice. Security, the loss of it, the finding of the need for it, how we act when security is shattered. Spirituality and God, the struggle to find faith, live without faith, etc. And survival, man versus nature. A great way to start developing your story idea is to start brainstorming who your protagonist will be. Are they female, male, non-binary? What do they look like physically? How did they grow up? You can describe their history or background. How do they behave and act on a daily basis? What secrets do they have? What weakness could the antagonist take advantage of? And real quick, I want to touch on the second to last question here about secrets. So we all have secrets. As human beings, we have secrets. We have things we don't want people to know about us, things that we would rather keep secret or private. So brainstorming secrets for your characters, the things that they don't want other people to know, can really help you create a super juicy plot, a plot twist, or possibly even a subplot. So I highly recommend coming up with secrets for your characters. That's just a little tip there for character development if you really want to make sure your characters are multidimensional and don't fall flat. So once you know who your protagonist is, then you can brainstorm who or what your antagonist will be. What do they want from your protagonist and why? How will they get it? What is the motivation behind wanting this? Revenge, world domination, security, love? So now that we've clarified that story idea a bit more, we can really start to expand upon it. And the thing that I love to do when it comes to expanding upon my book ideas is to create a mind map, which is very similar to what you see right here. So obviously, as you can see here, this is a mind map for the concept of creativity. So what we're going to do is actually take something similar, like a similar methodology, but apply it to your book idea. So here is the story mind map template that I created. This is what I used in order to mind map all of my book ideas, and it has been really, really helpful so far. This is the same thing that I asked you to download at the beginning of this workshop, so make sure you do that on the membership site. So in the middle, you will see you have your theme or your message to the reader, so that keeps you focused on what the overall theme of your story is. In case you start to write something or stray from that theme, you have it right there in the center that you can refocus on. In the top left corner, you have the protagonist's motive and also the antagonist's motive. This is another great thing to have just front and center, right in your face, so you can remember what your main character's motive is for doing the things that they're doing, and same with your antagonist. Why are they behaving this way? Why are they after the protagonist? Why are they making the choices that they're making? In the top right-hand corner, you will see a space for the inciting incident and also your plot. Now, if you can summarize your plot in 1 to 3 sentences, that's going to help you, again, just really narrow down and zone in on what the main point of your story is. And your inciting incident, in case you don't know what that is the thing that gets the ball rolling. So this is the reason why your character is suddenly going on this giant quest or this whole journey to kind of get through the whole entire plot, to get to the big reveal. That's what your inciting incident is. It's usually something that happens that propels the character forward into the rest of the plot. In the bottom right-hand corner, you have a space for the conflict and also any subplots. Now, you may need more space for this, so this mind map template may be something that you put on a much larger piece of paper, but this is a great place to have the conflicts in your book, maybe just the major conflicts, and then any kind of conflicts or other subplots, like romantic subplots that aren't a main part of the plot, but they're still important to the story. And then lastly, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can write 1 to 3 sentences for how your book is going to end, and also how the reader should feel by the time they reach the end of your book. Again, having all of this right in front of you is really going to help keep you focused on where your story is headed, how it needs to end, and also how the reader should feel. What emotion are you going to pull from the reader when you end your story? So, of course, the best way to learn how to fill out this mind mapping template for your own book is to look at an example. And so I chose Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. If you have not read the first book in the Harry Potter series or seen the movie, then you can go ahead and just move to the next slide, but that is the end of this workshop. So you can go ahead and just move past this and go ahead and work on that mind mapping template. But now we're going to go through Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone so you can see how all of this ties together, and also why this would be super helpful to have sitting next to you when you are writing your story. So first, let's focus on the middle box, themes or message to the reader. There are a lot of themes and messages throughout the Harry Potter series, and specifically in the first book, because it's setting everything up for the rest of the series. So some of the themes in Harry Potter are death, love, coming of age or self-discovery, and of course, good versus evil. Now let's move up to the upper left-hand corner. We have the protagonist's motives, which is Harry Potter. His motives are discovery of self and also vengeance for his parents' murder. And then beneath that, we have the antagonist's motives, which is Voldemort. He wants immortality and to gain absolute control over the wizarding universe. So now we move to the right, where we look at the inciting incident, or how Harry Potter gets started on his journey. And that really happens during Hagrid's arrival, where he informs Harry that he is a wizard. He has to know that he's a wizard in order for the story to move forward in the way that it does. And then the plot in one sentence: a boy wizard begins training and must battle for his life with the Dark Lord, aka Voldemort, who murdered his parents. Then we move down to the next box in the bottom right. The conflict here is Harry Potter defeating the Dark Lord Voldemort. And then some subplots in the first book specifically are Harry and Draco's animosity, because that does play out in future books, Hagrid and his dragon from Professor Quirrell, Harry becoming Quidditch seeker, and of course the friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And lastly, we move to the left, where we have the ending of the book and also how the reader should feel. So the ending of the first book is that Harry retrieves the Sorcerer's Stone, which basically means that good overcomes evil. So we've tied back in with the theme here of good versus evil, as well as with death, love, coming of age, self-discovery. Those were all woven in throughout the plot and also all of the subplots. So how the reader should feel, since good did overcome evil, is maybe curious at how the next books are going to play out, if there is going to be a next book. They should feel vindicated and satisfied because good overcame evil, unless of course they wanted evil to win, but most of the time we want good to overcome evil. I have used this template for every single one of the books that I have written, and it has been a lifesaver when I kind of start to stray a little bit in my prose, or a character's starting to do something that maybe is out of character for them or just doesn't really line up with the subplot or the conflict. This is just a great cheat sheet, if you will, to have next to you as you are writing your story. So that concludes this Story Ideas Mind Mapping Workshop. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Happy writing!